Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Phil Fraser. Phil, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Tom. How are you doing?
Marvelous. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, so there's two parts to who I am, really. I spent 18 years growing a business from kitchen table startup all the way through to a PLC sale. That sale went through in 2018. I'm now working as a business coach. I call myself a business sounding board, working with SMEs to help them grow their businesses. So passing on the experience that I learned over those 18 years, and hopefully helping other businesses be trying to be as successful as we were.
Thank you for the introduction. It's a nice segue into my first question, which is you position yourself as a sounding board. For those that don't know, what is a sounding board, a business sounding board?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways of looking at it. In terms of, okay, what do I do? I answer that whole cliche thing of it's lonely at the top. When you're running your own business, there are certain aspects of the business that you just can't discuss with other people. You can't talk to your sales manager and say, look, hang on, we're a bit in the shit here. What should we do next? And as a business owner, you're the one the team come to for the answers. And sometimes, and many business owners will know this, and I had it when I was running my businesses. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. And actually, to have somebody you can sit with without any prejudice, without any bias, without any politics, and completely openly say, Phil, I've got this issue. I don't know what the answer is, or I'm thinking of doing this. Does it sound stupid? Or I've got 4 ideas. I'm not sure which one's the best one. Can you just listen to me? Or even working as somebody to really be responsible for. So if I sat down with somebody and say, well, 2 weeks ago you said you were going to do this, have you done it? One of the beauties of running your own business is you can do whatever you want. You're not responsible to somebody, and that's good because you can take your business whichever way you want. The bad side of it is you've got nobody saying, well, did you do that? So the sounding board bit is sort of part mentor, part business coach, but very much, I've been a business owner. I'm just slightly further down the same track that you're on. How can I help you?
Something that you mentioned, which I've found is totally applicable to me, which is having someone to talk to about maybe things that you're not 100% sure on. Just having that conversation can sometimes give you the ideas. So if it's all in your head, then that's kind of where it stays, and maybe you don't make much progress in the way that you would do. And if unless you spoke to someone, and when you speak to someone, maybe that's not even them that gives you the answer, it's yourself. Have you ever found that to be the case?
Absolutely, that is 100% the thing. I will often have people who come to me and say, Phil, will you just listen? And all I do is prod and poke. Why have you said that? What's the benefit of that? And after an hour, they say, Phil, that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks, I know what I'm going to do. And I think, well, I actually didn't actually say anything. And I sometimes compare it to in Harry Potter. Do you watch Harry Potter?
It's been a while, but yeah.
It's been a while. So Dumbledore has a pensieve, if you remember, where he sort of pulls memories out of people's minds, in effect. And that's what I'm doing is the answer is in people's heads. I'm just prodding and poking the corners where they sort of find the answers themselves, which they either knew or they ignored or they hadn't thought of, or were there and they didn't think that would be the answer to the problem. So yeah, a lot of the time it's that concept of verbalizing something solidifies it. So if like you said, you've got an idea in your head, you sort of roll it around. But if you actually say it to somebody, as you're saying it, it solidifies, and you either get to the end of the sentence and think, no, that's bollocks, isn't it? Or you get to the end of the sentence and think, yeah, that does stack up. Yeah, it's a good idea. And I've not done anything. I've just sat and listened. So that's where the sounding board thing comes in. Although a bit of it is also imposter syndrome in me, not wanting to sort of put my head above the parapet and go, yeah, I'm a fantastic coach and I'll make your business 10 times better.
Well, as I mentioned before we started recording, I watched your story, which I will put in the show notes for other people to watch, because I think you were super prepared and you went through it with, your screenshots and stuff. And I think that's probably the best video regarding your story that, I don't think I would be able to get better than what you did there. But what I did have is a bunch of questions that perhaps might be valuable to the audience, which I think are going to be applicable. And one of the things which I think you emphasized a fair amount in the story was when you hired someone who challenged you. So, the way I put it is like a leader, someone who's going to lead your team, but also challenges you as the business owner. Would you, for people that perhaps haven't considered or done that themselves, would you like to elaborate on why that was beneficial for you?
Okay, so there's a sort of bit of precursor to that. Before we finally sold the business, we had put the business up on the market, and for various reasons we didn't sell. But we already had a plan B, which was to bring somebody in to run the business while I sort of took a step back. And that's where bringing in a number two came in. I've actually written a whole blog about it. So if you go to we'll talk about my website later, but if you go to my website, it's a whole story about how to recruit a number two. But one of the things he said to me in the initial interview was, "Are you really ready to let go?" Which was a really pertinent question, because if when you've been running your own business, you've been the boss, you make the decisions, you make the calls, you decide what goes on. When you bring in a number two or a COO or a second in command, or whatever you want to call them, you have to give them the reins to be able to make those decisions. Now, there is something inherent, I think, in all business owners that they want to be the general, they want to be in charge. So actually, it's you have to be self-aware to be able to go, look, this guy's going to now make some key decisions. I've actually got to let him make them, whether I think they're right or wrong, because that also then sends a message to the team as well. So the first time one of your team comes into your office and says, "Phil, can we discuss this?" You have to say, "No, go and speak to the number two." But what it does do is it challenges your thinking, because as a business owner, you're going, right, we've done it this way, we've always done it that way, and this is the roadmap. When somebody comes in and goes, "Well, actually, that roadmap's either wrong or I can improve it, or we can get from A to B, but we don't go this way, we go that way," you have to allow them to do that. And a lot of that trust is built obviously by experience, but a lot of it is built inherently as you do the recruitment process, because you've got to get the right person on board. And it's a learning process, because you have to relearn what your role is, because your role becomes limited, because some of the stuff you were doing as the boss, you give to somebody else. So one of the key things I found was that actually I recreated my reason for being in the business, whereas he took some of that stuff away, the day-to-day, the management, the staff, the sales, strategy. My role was developing him and looking at the bigger strategy, but also being the proper grown-up business owner whose role is actually to put the tools in place to allow the number two to make the decisions he does. So if he says, "Look, we need another web developer, we need another salesperson," you as the business owner have to say, "Right, yeah, the funds are there to do that." So it's a fascinating process, because it challenges lots and lots of different things, but it's a big step change.
It's quite interesting that he perhaps had the foresight right at the beginning to say, "Are you sure you're going to let me make some decisions here?" The thing which comes up for me is, because I can imagine, I'm sure there are hundreds or thousands of scenarios where people have hired someone to run a business and they have and haven't done well at it. Have you got any thoughts about that particular?
One of the things we did, and I can't remember where I picked this up, but one of the key things I thought was, obviously the guy's got to be able to do the job and he's got the skills and all that sort of thing. But I thought one of the key things is I have to get on with this person, on a personal level. And what I did was, we went through obviously a recruitment consultant, but what I did was I said to the recruitment consultant, "I want to go and have coffee with all the applicants before we do an interview." So no CVs, no meeting room, it's coffee and a chat. just to get a feel for connecting with the person. And that was fascinating on a number of levels, but one of the key levels was people dropped their guard. Because, you know, when you go to an interview, you're on interview mode, and, you know, you've got all your questions ready and all that. You know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? All that sort of stuff that we get told we're supposed to do. Just go, right, we're going to have a coffee pre-interview. And it ticked lots of people and put crosses in lots of things. So I think a lot of the planning is important, but that, as the business owner, I think the key is you have to be ready to let go. And I think that's difficult for an entrepreneur, because that's not the way we're built. We are entrepreneurs, we are business owners because we want to do it our way. We can do it better than somebody else did. We've got that burning passion. And then to say, okay, you do it, you know, it's a tough one. But again, there's lots of preparation that's got to be in place. So things, you know, we had a BHAG on the wall, big, hairy, audacious goal, which obviously you've heard from Jim Collins, good to great. So as long as you're heading in the right direction, it's a question of just how you get there. And if if your number two decides you want to go this route, or, you know, one of the things he particularly did was probably over a year process, got rid of 2 or 3 members of staff and brought in 2 or 3 new ones. Now, is that pointing the finger at me saying I've recruited shit staff? You know, it may be. It obviously may not be. But, you know, as a business owner, you've got to hold your hands up and go, yeah, if you want to do that, you know, knock yourself out, sort of thing. There's a big trust element in it, which is why I think that the coffee worked really, really well. The key thing is you've got to have clear parameters and be willing to let go. I think they're the important things.
And an emphasis on the when you're hiring, do as much of due diligence as you possibly can, because you did.
Yeah.
Was it 3 interviews?
Yeah. So we did with everyone. We did a coffee. We then did the sort of formal, you know, CV, talk me through your career, that sort of thing. And then the third one we did. So the second one was like, can you do the job? Third interview was, okay, if you got the position, how would you do the job? So we actually gave them a scenario that they had to do a presentation for. And actually, we went through this process first time round, and we got to the end goal. We had one lady who was up for it, and we just didn't think she was right. In the third interview, we went all the way back to start and started again. So the process is important.
Interesting. One of the things which you said was beneficial was the weekly one-to-one staff meetings. But what I didn't get from that was what was the change? So the before and after, in terms of why that was beneficial.
That came from a podcast I picked up on holiday called Manager Tools. I think the website is manager-tools.com. And they have, it's been going years and years and years, but they have these 3 basics to their management training. One is one-on-ones, one is delegation, one is feedback. And the one-on-ones were something that's key to them, which is either the business owner or the team manager has a half-an-hour meeting that is fixed in the diary every week with every person, and it's the person who's you're meeting with, they set the agenda. And it's not a work in progress meeting. It's not even an appraisal. It's just, okay, if we were doing it, Tom, okay, what do you want to talk about this week? And it might be something at home that's pissing you off. It might be something at work that's pissed you off. It might be you just want to talk about your career. You might talk about training. It could be all sorts of stuff. And there's obviously a lot of psychology underneath it. I think it says to a lot of people, yeah, they care about me. They care about my opinion. They care about where I'm coming from. They care about what my issues are. But I think from a business point of view, the more you understand your team and your team members, the more you can mold and manage them to do what they're there to do. So in our one-on-ones, you know, I had some staff who would keep it focused on work in progress. They just didn't want anything else to happen. Other team members, I heard about, you know, grandparents and dead cats and boyfriends and all that sort of stuff. But if you know and you show you care what's going on in your team's minds, I think That really, really helps. And also, if you're the sort of company who does, let's say, 6 monthly appraisals, which I think are terrible. Somebody sits there and goes, well, 5 months ago I had this issue. Well, absolutely pointless discussing it 5 months later. If it's, I've got a problem with Dave who sits next to me. I don't know, he's got BO. Something really minor, or I've fallen out with my boyfriend and I'm moving out. All these sorts of things. I think it's at the personal level. And like I say, some people didn't like them, some people wanted them, but you have to say, right, these are, and Manager Tools is brilliant. I would strongly recommend anybody who's got wants to develop themselves as a manager. I think it's brilliant. Very American, but great stuff.
Yeah, it makes me think of a conversation I had around. I was trying to get better at rewarding staff members. And someone introduced me to the concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations, I think was the term used. And extrinsic would be like pay, bonuses, that sort of thing. Intrinsic would be about, what's important to them. And I can see how you might be able to, knowing them better in the way that you highlighted, would be easier to make those distinctions. What do they care about, and how can you facilitate that essentially?
Absolutely. And yeah, the bigger your team gets, the more varied the type of person you have on the, inevitably you will have that. And it's part of it is just about caring about your team. Part of it is motivational. And part of it, I think particularly junior staff just like the fact that, I think our team, the biggest we got to was about 13. But, junior staff thinking, the boss is interested in me enough to give me half an hour every single week. Whereas the more senior people think, oh, I've got a hotline into the boss. I'll give them my idea as to what's going wrong with this business and how it should run, which we also have.
Yeah, I've also done had a lot of conversations around servant leadership, and the theme there is to talk with your staff. Be seen, be approachable. So there's a lot going on there with those weekly one-to-one staff meetings.
It is, and I'm sure people are listening to this going, hang on, I've got a team of 6 and that's half an hour each, and then there's the preparation before and the preparation. That's 4 or 5 hours a week. I can't afford that. Well, I'll tell you what, it's worth it. And as your team grows, you then feed it down to reports. So you have, let's say you've got a team of 6. You would do, you do the one-on-ones for the 3 heads of department, and the heads of department would do the one-on-ones with what the Americans call their reports, the people who report to them. But it's fascinating stuff. And one of the other things that's great in Manager Tools was all about feedback. They've got a brilliant feedback model, which I tried a few times, word for word, for the way they did it, and it was just like magic. It was just to explain. It was I won't tell you the exact wording because I can't remember it, but it was basically it was sort of 1 minute feedback. It was, Tom, can I give you some feedback? And like immediately you go, oh shit, I'm in trouble. But actually, what you're doing is you're giving positive feedback. So Tom, when you did that was really good. Carry on doing it, and that's it. And you go, oh bloody hell! And it's about actions rather than and it's really, really clever stuff.
Good. You mentioned your national TV advertising in your story.
Yeah.
As I'm interested in that topic. So, I mean, in terms of process of how you went about it, and then results and tracking the results, can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So we. Just to give your listeners an idea of what we were doing, we owned a website called Which Bingo, which was basically the TripAdvisor for online bingo, the review site. And we were very keen to be number one, but very, very much the sort of go-to place to go. And obviously, you've got an online business. The big thing is SEO and traffic and PPC and all that sort of stuff. We wanted to go a level above that. So we thought, okay, how do you do that? The best way to do it is TV. which again was sort of quite a big, scary thing because we're only a website, that sort of thing. Fortunately, my background was advertising. I worked in an ad agency for 6 years before we set the business up, so I sort of had a feel for it. But we used a local agency who I knew. We gave them a really tight brief. We gave them a budget, and they did the media buying for us. And the beauty about TV media buying, very like PPC media buying, if you set yourself a really tight target, you can get really targeted results on pretty low trafficked TV channels. The sort of, the sites you get to at the end of the day when you're really bored and you can't think of something to watch. God, who watches this stuff? Those sort of channels. So the aim of the campaign was partly branding and partly traffic. And the thing with because we were an affiliate, so although our site is a destination site, we make money in essence from people then going to brands that are advertising on our website. So we reckon we broke even sort of on a financial point of view within 3 months. But the big upside was the fact that we were on TV, because that positioned us in the market as this isn't just a WordPress hobby site out of somebody's bedroom. This is a proper big player. And it was part of a bigger campaign to really position us as a major player in the industry. We also produced an annual industry report. We also ended up doing industry awards as well. So it was part of the big picture. And I think still, even nowadays, you say to somebody, our company, we advertise on TV. That's cute. Yeah, people give you kudos for doing that. So it was part of a bigger picture rather than just, we spent X, we get Y back.
Is there any chance that you think that it helped you with the sale of the business at all?
Yes, probably, because it was part of that positioning of the site. I mean, as I say, we were an affiliate website, and it's very easy to knock up an affiliate website in any sector. So it's a very low barrier to entry. So we had to really, we had to be the titans in our sector, and it was part of that. And obviously from an acquirer looking into the sector, they go, okay, who's the number one? Who's the number two? Yeah, it's them. They have their own awards. They're on TV. They run an industry report. And that's before they even look at the numbers and the traffic and the revenue and all that sort of stuff. So yes, I think it probably did as well.
Well, that's a pretty good investment then, I suppose, especially if it ended up being free for you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You mentioned the awards ceremony. I think it's really cool that you, because essentially it's a decision, right? We're going to decide, make our own award ceremony. Can you tell me a little bit about the process that you decided to do that, how it went, and then you also mentioned some celebrity PR, which I think again is going to be invaluable.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know a bit more about that.
So we very, very early on. I mean, the website launched initially in 2000, so we were there sort of right from the start. And very early on in our journey, we created an awards, so Site of the Year and New Site of the Year, which in essence were player voted. So it was a traffic driver come to the site to vote, and a bit of PR on the back of it, and we email the winner and go, hey, you won our Site of the Year award. And they get a little graphic, and hopefully they link back to us, so we get some link juice as well. So it was really, really basic traffic and SEO stuff. And over the years that sort of grew. And a couple of members of my team said, we should do this as a proper awards. And our industry had a couple of broad-based, we were obviously part of the online gaming sector. So there's online casinos, online sports betting, online poker, and online bingo was part of that. And there were a number of industry-wide awards, which were sort of big, dinner jacket dues, spend a fortune, all that sort of thing, which fortunately we won quite a few of as well. So my mindset was, nobody's going to come to our awards. We're just a website. And eventually I gave in, and the sort of main protagonist, I said, right, okay, you can project manage it. So we went through the whole process of, okay, we found like an events agency we're in Leeds. We sorted us out a venue in London, and And then we sort of promoted it to all our clients and said, look, we're doing this awards ceremony, and you've got to promote these awards because you want to win. You want to win one of these awards, and you've got to promote it to your players because they've got to come to the website to vote. So it was sort of part PR, part branding, part traffic, part SEO, all sort of rolled in together. And we took the decision quite early on, particularly the first couple of years, this was a marketing expenditure. So it's going to cost, I think somewhere between 15 and 20 grand or something. It was quite a hefty whack, but it's worth it because it's part of the whole positioning thing. And so we all sort of trooped down to London and we put this event on, and it went amazingly well. So we started doing it every year. And the second, I think it was the second or third year we did it at Madame Tussauds. No, we were going to do it at London Zoo, and for whatever reason they couldn't host it. And they said, "Oh well, we're part of the same group as Madame Tussauds. Do you want to do it there instead? We'll do it at the same cost." We were like, "Yeah, of course we will." So we did it at Madame Tussauds, and it was sensational. It went absolutely brilliant. But one of the fantastic things that happened was one of the things in the online bingo sector was very easy to produce a new bingo site. It was just a reskin. And one of our clients had done a deal with Kerry Katona, who's always great for PR, called Bingo with Kerry, which is great because obviously it's targeted right at her audience. And it was the year that she'd launched, so she was part of the new site of the year, and she won. So we got loads of photos with Kerry Katona holding one of our awards in front of our we got some sponsors in, but we created a board like you get at when a manager's talking at football, so all the brands, and she promoted it, and it got promoted all over the place. It was absolutely fantastic. But from a branding and positioning point of view, it was fantastic because the whole industry wanted to be there. Everybody wanted to win an award. We used to, afterwards we turn up at people's offices and they had them in reception behind the receptionist and all that. It was just fantastic, and they all took pictures and selfies and they promoted them around and they said, "Hey, we want to win which bingo awards," and it just worked fantastically well. I think we broke even on it one year, I think, with a sponsor, but it was worth it.
Have you got any thoughts on, because I can see it being highly beneficial, but in terms of how someone might do that when they're in an industry, so they're not like, because you can promote other people and it's not a problem for you, right?
Yeah.
If you're in an industry. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think you have to have, it's a little bit chicken and egg. I think you have to have the kudos to be able to do it. So you can't sort of start up a business 6 months later, right, we're going to do sort of the industry awards. You go, well, who are you? It's got to be legitimate. So all of ours was clean and above board. It wasn't paid for, none of that sort of nonsense that people do with industry awards. And I think there has to be some value on it. If you said, with all due respect, "Hey, you've won the Thomas Green Award this month," and they go, "Who? Why? What is it?" It's got to have some kudos. So it's a bit chicken and egg. You have to, as a part of that industry, you have to have some kudos for it to have some value, because then potential winners will value it and then they will market it, and it sort of goes round and round in circles. It's a bit, I use TripAdvisor as the example. If you go to a restaurant now and it's got a TripAdvisor sticker on the window and it's got, we're a 5-star TripAdvisor restaurant, it has some kudos. If it's, the John Brown Restaurant of the Month award, who's John Brown? But as a branding and a positioning, I think an award ceremony is fantastic.
Well, John Brown's got some kudos now, though, because you just mentioned him.
Everybody's going to want a John Brown Restaurant Award now, aren't they?
Exactly. I get the idea. It's kind of like a snowball effect, right? So have some authority, build it up over time, and then it might be worth something. But just the idea that it was just an idea in someone's mind, and then it became this big thing. It's just one of those cool things that is just a nice story to listen to.
Yeah, there were lots of ideas. There was lots of ideas we had that didn't get off the ground as well, but I won't discuss those.
Well, I mean, that's really intriguing during a conversation, isn't it? But the important thing, I think, You mentioned someone in your story. I think it's like a LinkedIn profile that you highlighted, and I think that person advised that you started recording regularly your stats.
Yes.
So stuff that maybe people should be doing that they aren't doing. And correct me if I'm wrong, you started getting more disciplined with that, and it haven't had an impact on your business. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we had, I mentioned getting his job title was commercial director, but my number two. And we were a couple of years in, we were discussing strategy and which way to go and all that sort of thing. And we had, 3 or 4 ideas. So what we did was we said, we'll get a consultant in and see what he thinks. And he did a number of really brilliant things. One of which is dead simple, and I've done it with a couple of clients already. Was he did a 360. So he interviewed every member of staff. What's good about the business, what's bad about the business, where do you think there's opportunities, all that sort of stuff, and fed that back. But what he also did, he came from a manufacturing background. So he was very numbers and widgets and pounds, shillings and pence and the whole sort of thing, which we weren't because the business was owned by myself and my wife. There were no shareholders, there was nobody to report to. We kept an eye on the important stuff, but not some of the sort of secondary sort of KPIs. And what he sat down with us and said, okay, this is your financial goal. We had a number we were aiming at. He said, okay, what are the key parameters that will make that happen? And obviously things like sales and stuff like that, but it was things like traffic and various. We ended up, I think, with 7 or 8 different parameters. And he used a system which was, he called it a weekly drumbeat meeting. And it was a stand-up meeting once a week. And so what we'd done is we determined what these parameters were, and we determined what the target was for those parameters. And then each week we do this 5-minute drumbeat meeting where people reported what those numbers were, and they were either red or green. So yes, we've hit it, or no, we haven't. And then it was a case of, okay, well, if we haven't hit it, why haven't we hit it? What are we going to do to hit it next week? And that made us a lot more formal in terms of what we were trying to do, rather than the way the business, I think, had run previously, which was sort of just roll with it and we're doing okay, so yeah, we'll carry on doing it. It was a lot more what I call grown-up business, whereas before we sort of, however it happened, we were doing quite well and numbers were rolling in, so yeah, we'll carry on doing it. Well, he'd come from a PLC, I think, previously. So he gave us some proper grown-up parameters, and what that did, that contributed to when we finally sold, probably 2-3 years later, we were in much better financial health than we had been, because we were looking at numbers, we were looking at the right numbers rather than just some of the numbers we wanted to look at.
I can imagine the spreadsheet being highly beneficial as well. So if you've got a load of red on there, something's very wrong. And if you've got a load of green, you're going in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that was what he did was I think, if I remember right, there was an annual figure and a sort of a monthly figure, so we knew sort of which direction we were going in. So a lot of the time, obviously, the annual stuff was red, because obviously it was annual. You're not going to hit it towards the end. But the weekly or the monthly stuff, we were green. So week 1, like for sale, if we had a figure for sales, week 1 might be red, week 2 might be red, week 3 might be green, because we've hit this month's target. You go, fantastic. Then week 4 is even greener, if you can have it even greener. But yeah, it made us focus on, because we'd done this whole process, it made us realize what the key parameters were that were key indicators as to we were doing the right stuff. So it wasn't just, yeah, we've sold 50 grand worth of stuff this month, fantastic. It's actually, we've sold 50 grand worth of stuff this month because this parameter, that parameter, and this parameter were going in the right direction. Whereas previously, I think we just went, oh, we've sold 50 grand this month. Well done.
Yeah, sounds like there's some 80-20 in there as well, focusing on all the right stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Really interesting. So it brings me to kind of my last category point, which I think is going to be a big part of it, and that is the selling of the business. You've got a successful exit, but my guess is that there's a whole big story about that process. And I mean, I got from the story video that someone outbid the original buyer, but I'd love to know about the process, how it went, pretty much the lead up, right up until the funds go in your bank account.
Yeah. So we could. Have we got another half an hour? We can we could do the whole thing. In our, I mentioned we were in the online gaming sector. In the sector, there were 4 or 5 big acquisition companies who were just buying up smaller businesses. So it was quite an active M&A market, and a lot of that was public. So we knew who was buying what, and particularly interestingly, how much they were, or broadly how much they were paying. And over the years, as we'd grown, we'd had quite a lot of people who come to us and said, are you willing to sell? And I'd always said the same thing, which was, if you put enough money on the table, you can have the keys. Very simple. We're not for sale, but and for whatever reason, I've got a drawer full of NDAs and no deal happened. Anyway, so we were approached by one of these acquisitors who said, right, we're interested in buying you, and gave us an indication of the number they were willing to pay. Now that number was big enough for us to go, this is quite interesting. So we went down to London, met them. What transpired was the number that they'd said or alluded to was lots of caveats and lots of yes, well, and all this sort of thing. So I thought, no, it's not right for us. But what I did, and because it's quite a small industry, I basically spoke to the other acquisition companies and said, look, we're not for sale, but if you're interested, you might want to talk to us now, because we're talking to somebody else. And one of those companies came forward and said, we're interested. Got quite a long way down the line with them. And what happened was, one of the other companies who previously said, we're not interested, actually came out and said, well, actually, we are. Now, I'm very much a man of my word and don't like going back on deals with people. And we were actually just about to sign an NDA with the second company. And I said to the other guys, I said, look, if you're going to do it, you've got to move the dial a lot further to make me change horses. And they came back a week later and said, right, here's a number, which was, and not only here's a number of it, but a more improved structure from a financing point of view. So I had to go back to these other guys and say, look, I'm really, really sorry that, this isn't a negotiation thing. We've been approached by somebody else. We're going to go with them. Now, obviously, they were pissed off. I didn't like doing that, but these things happen. And actually, what transpired was I did the deal over the phone, a couple of emails with the CEO quite quickly, because it was somebody I knew before. But then we had 4.5 to 5 months of legals, partly because although they're a PLC, they're non-UK. They had American-trained lawyers. We had obviously English lawyers, and American law and English law is like speaking 2 different languages. So that complicated things. Because they were a PLC, the sales director wanted his 10 penneth in the deal. The finance director needed something in the deal. The CEO wanted something strategic. So we had lots and lots of backwards and forwards. Just, it was annoying. It was like changing like 2 sentences, and then we'd go around in circles, and they'd be changed. That third sentence to change. For God's sake! So it took about 4.5 to 5 months from agreeing the deal to signing the deal. We had a 3-month handover. I was asked very early on in the process, do you want to stay on? I said no, just give me the money, I'll walk away. We had a 3-month handover. The payments were structured throughout that 3 months, and 2 of the hardest things I ever had to do were the day I had to walk into my team, into a team meeting, and say, hey guys, we've sold the business and they don't want you. They didn't want any of our staff, which was just a horrible thing to do. I mean, really, really horrible. It took me 3 goes to get out of my chair, to get to the door, to open the door, to go to the meeting room. It was just really, really difficult. So that was really difficult. And then the final day that we actually worked, so 3 months later, was, we'd handed everything over and over a 3-month period, we almost got to a point where my team was saying, "Look, Phil, I've got nothing to do." I was like, "Well, just hang around and whatever." And then the last day was a Friday. Closed up the office, went for lunch, then all went to the pub, and sort of one by one, people were going, and it was right. Okay, bye. Not like see you Monday. It was like, okay, bye, which was just heartbreaking. It really, really was.
Kind of weird.
It was just really, really, really weird. And so the good thing out of it from the team's point of view is over that 3 months, I said to them all, look, get yourself another job. You can go to as many interviews as you want, you can have as much time off as you want. Plus, they also got a loyalty bonus for staying for the 3 months. So a lot of them sort of left on the Friday, got a new job on the Monday, arguably with better money, and they were all fine. But during that 3-month period, a lot of them said to me, I'm really sad about this because I really want to stay working here. You've done the right, and they all said, you've done the right thing and all sorts of things, but I really like working here, which is a real, it was nice. And what's really nice is I've kept in touch with at least 6 or 7 of them I'm in touch with on an almost weekly or monthly basis. One of the team I'm still playing five-a-side with. So that's really, really nice that that they do keep in touch, and a couple of them have come to me for advice, which is great. We must have done something right somewhere along the line.
Is there any possibility that when you go back to the original buyer, that you then lose both your buyers if the deal doesn't go through?
You could do, until with any deal, until you've signed a piece of paper. Actually, it's not even until you've signed a piece of paper. It's until the money lands in the bank. There's always going to be issues. And this was one of the beauties of the deal we did. It was quite clear on the cash. There wasn't an earn out. It wasn't subject to figures. It was, that's the money. That's how it's going to be sliced. That's the dates it will land. A couple of them were caveated on stuff we had to hand over, which is fair enough. But yeah, on any deal, and I've got a very good friend who's a business broker or works in corporate finance, that sort of stuff, and he said to me, he advised me a lot during it, just as a hand holding, sort of going back to the sounding board thing we started right at the start. One of the things people always say in a business sale is don't tell anybody, don't tell any of the team, and carry on doing business as if it's not going to happen. Which is why when the day I walked in and said, right, we sold the business, everyone was like, what? There was nothing. There was no sniff of anything. But that whole, everything has to carry on. You've got to assume that the deal isn't going to happen until, the first pound hits the bank.
Mm. And you said it took 4 or 5 months. Is there anything that you would have done differently to ensure that didn't happen, let's say, the next time around?
I think our lawyers were saying quite early on, you have to get them to get some English lawyers on this. That was the first thing. I think, and I don't know why it was, we spent a lot of time on heads of terms rather than on the SPA. But I suppose if you do it on the heads of terms, you don't do it on the SPA. I think they were the only things really. We were a dozen strong business. They're a PLC. It's quite hard to sort of stamp your foot, particularly when there's sort of pound signs right in front of you. And that's the danger. And that's always the danger, I think, with anybody who's thinking of selling their business, is they psychologically start spending the money and they take their eye off the business. Mm. Because there's so many things that could go wrong, that you've got to assume it's not going to happen until it happens. Because if the day before we signed, if they said, you know what, we're not going to do it, my team and my business just has to carry on the same numbers. Plus, also, if it's taken 4 or 5 months and you've taken your eye off the ball, and your numbers are starting to drop, they're going to come back to you and say, well, actually, before you were doing X, you're now doing Y. We're going to chip the price. Mm-hmm. So it's in your benefit to work even harder.
What were you doing on the day that the money landed, and what was that like, that process?
What was I doing? I think I was in the office, but the first tranche landed in my wife's and I, well, actually it was in the business account, and it was quite big. And I just looked at it and went, hell, I took a screen. Sorry, excuse the language. Took a screenshot of the bank of it online and just sent it to my wife, and it was just like, which doesn't sound very professional, very business-like, but when it does happen like that, you just go, "What? That's ridiculous." So yeah, that was a fun one, because again, it was and it got slightly complicated, and because they're a PLC, various people have to sign different bits of paper. So it's like, oh, it's going to land at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like 10:01, 10:02, I'm refreshing the phone and it's not there, and I'm pressing F5 on my computer. So I sort of call them at lunchtime. Oh, the FD isn't in this morning or something. Well, all he's got to do is sign this bit of paper to make this money go across. So those sort of things are probably more stressful, because they're a PLC. It's like, he's probably in a pile of 5 or 6 different bits of paper he's got to sign, and mine's just one of them. And I'm thinking, sign the bloody bit of paper to make the payment go.
I was going to say, were you hitting the refresh key?
Oh, absolutely. My F5 just has an F on it now.
Anything to note on the, for others about the concept of selling a business?
I think one of the key things we learned, there's 2 or 3 things, and I think one of them is getting a CEO, getting a COO or a second in command in place is important, because you as the business owner have to make yourself redundant to sell the business. If you take a very simple example, if you're a plumber and you're a one-man band, you can't sell a business because you are the business. You sort of extrapolate that out. You need to get to a point where you are, yes, you're important to the business, but you're not important to the day-to-day running of the business. So the first thing is you have to get yourself out of the business, make yourself redundant. And the best way to do that is to do something somebody told me was called a 2-week holiday test. If you go on holiday for 2 weeks, what happens to the business? Does it carry on and runs fine, or are you sat by the pool, on your phone every day? Because if you are, you haven't got sellable business. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is to understand market prices. So if somebody comes to you and says, I'll give you £1 million for your business, you might go, hey, that's fantastic. But actually, if you don't know what your industry multiples are, you don't know whether that's a good price or a bad price.
Did you do any valuation for your business?
Yeah, so what happened was, as I said earlier, our sector was quite public in the sort of multiples that were going on. So we knew what a good offer was and what a bad offer was. So we had an idea so we looked at it as multiple. So I think the industry multiples were something like 5 to 5.5, and I think we got more than that. So you have to understand what and also on what your industry values on. So is it on profit? Is it on average annual repeat revenue? Is it on turnover? Is it on staff base? Is it on customer numbers? You have to understand your industry's metrics and what those multiples are, to then go, there's actually 2 things you can do. Number one is you can then say, well, if somebody offers us this, it's a good price or a bad price. You can do it the other way around, because somebody again said to me, the first price that everybody wants for their business is number of shareholders times £1 million. Because psychologically, everybody wants to walk away with £1 million. So if you know what the multiples are, you can say, okay, well, if we all want to walk away with £1 million, we have to get to this figure, because that's what the industry is buying at, and we can work it out. But you can't say, I want £1 million for my business if the industry multiple is 3 and you're making 100 grand a year. So you've got to understand that. So the first thing is make yourself redundant. The second thing is understand the market. The third thing, I think, and we failed at this, was because we were privately owned, as I said, it was just myself and my wife, we didn't track data the way the industry tracked data. So when a buyer came to us and said, what's this figure, what's that rate, what's that churn, or whatever it might be, we weren't keeping that data because we weren't using it. It wasn't useful for what we did. We had the data, but we weren't analysing it the way the industry buyers were doing it. So the thing to do then is to ensure you are collecting and recording data the way buyers want it. So if your industry is very focused on monthly churn rates, you should keep a track of your monthly churn rates, whether you use that data or not, just so you've got it. Because what we had to do, or I had to do, because nobody else knew about it, I had to go backwards and recreate all this analysis from the data we had, but in the format they wanted it. So that's it. That's important as well.
Sounds like a fun job.
One of the worst things, and anybody who's got a tech company or anything to do with a website will appreciate this, because it was obviously a website. For whatever reason, their techies wanted to see our code. Now, as the CEO or the owner of the business, I don't have any passwords. I don't know how to log into the back end and stuff like that. So they said, we want to see the code. We see your raw code. I said, well, I haven't got the password. So I had to sort of create a scenario within the team that we needed to sort of rehash our security and put all our passwords in a file so I could access it and I knew where it was and all that sort of thing. So I sort of lost this request for the back end passwords in the whole sort of company thing so that I could then share with somebody. So again, and again, that was an interesting one because a lot of techies will comment code. So, this line of code does this line of code does that sort of thing. So somebody else looking at it understands what it is. When you're in a small business and you only got a small web dev team, they'll just code and often not comment it. So I had these we had to log in. We did it on a Sunday morning. It was ridiculous. We had to log in on a Sunday morning so they could see the code and I could watch them. They were going, well, what does this line do? I don't know. It's not commented. I have no idea. I understood very basic HTML and that's it. So again, and that leads on to probably the other thing that's important is contracts. Because when you buy a business, as a buyer, you want it to be as safe and as solid as you can. So you want to see client contracts, supplier contracts, staff contracts, that sort of thing. If you've got a business where Dave down the road has worked with you for 10 years and there's nothing in writing, that's inherently of no value to a potential buyer because Dave might just go, I'm off. Now, you as the seller, you go, well, Dave spends 100 grand with us a year. Where's the contract? So those sort of things, as I say, client contracts, supplier contracts, finance on assets, that type of thing, staff contracts, all that sort of dull paperwork that again is probably in most businesses somewhere, but isn't in a file that a potential buyer can go, right, show me all your client contracts.
It's reminds me of what you said a moment ago. Did you call it adult businesses?
Yeah, it's proper grown-up business.
Grown-up, yeah. Well, is there anything that when you went through your story on that video that you wish you had have added at the time?
That's a very good question. Anything I've added? I mean, that was, I think the video you're referring to, I think I had 30 minutes or 40 minutes to do. Yeah, it took 18 years from startup to sale. Yeah, there's tons of stuff. There's lots of blind alleys we went down, lots of ideas that didn't work, various ideas that did work. I mean, one of the things, I don't know if I referred to it in the video or not. One of the things we did was we borrowed ideas from best practice from everywhere. So we had a directory section of the site, and we said, okay, who's got the best directory on the internet? And I think one of our guys was a keen film fan. He said Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes, the film review place. It's, you get green tomatoes and red tomatoes. So we basically took their idea. We ended up with green thumbs up and red thumbs down, and we tweaked it and that sort of thing. For our news section, we said, okay, where's best practice of news? Right, the BBC News website. So, okay, what does that look like? We built it around that. So I think, you can take best practice from all over the place. I mean, we borrowed an idea from, I think it's Amazon who do, other people like this product. So we, on ours, was like, other people who looked at this bingo site liked these 2 or 3 bingo sites, and it just adds traffic and all that sort of thing. And we tested lots of stuff, and some of it worked and some of it didn't work. And we were refining all the time. But I think that's probably the key one, is actually you can take best practice from all over the place.
That's a business principle that I think has been used. The story I think of it is I'm not sure which way around it was, but I think it's like the fast food drive-through was inspired by the bank tellers, the cashiers, because it was taken from one industry and applied to another, something like that.
Yeah. And the Motorola flip was taken from Star Trek.
I didn't know that one.
That's true. Apparently.
That's cool. What are your goals, Phil?
My goals as a sounding board, what I'm looking to do is take on, I've only been doing sounding board business coaching for about a year. My target is to get 10 clients, which doesn't sound a lot, but I want to be able to give those clients the best of me, and the best value. So 10 clients by the end of the year would be great.
Very specific.
Well, if I get to the entrepreneur in me will go, right, you've got 10, what should you do next?
Well, is it more kind of like a lifestyle business for you?
That's the other thing. It is lifestyle. I really love talking to people about their businesses. When you sit on a train, or you sat by a pool, or you're on your aircraft with somebody, and you go, what game are you in? And they go, we make pens. And most people are going, oh, bloody hell, let's talk about something else. And I go, you make pens? How does that work? How did you get into that market? What's the profit margins like? So I love talking to people about their businesses. So it's an enjoyable thing. And 10 gives me lifestyle enough to not be running around like a headless chicken. I do some voluntary mentoring as well, so that fits in as well. So yeah, it's a lifestyle business, but I enjoy it, and hopefully I can pass some of the value of what I've learned on my business journey to other people. Because what you tend to find is most people have similar problems. I think the peer group guy you interviewed a few weeks ago was saying, most people have got, a terrorist member of staff. We had one of those. They want to increase sales. They don't know how to increase their profit. They've hit a wall. A lot of people have similar business issues that they need to discuss, irrelevant of sector.
Well, if it's anything like this conversation, I'm sure your coaching is highly valuable. Can you tell people where the best place to find you is?
Okay, the best place to find me is either on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn most days, so it's just Phil Fraser. My website is www.philfraser.co.uk. Don't go to philfraser.com, because that's a medieval reenactment costume company. So if you see lots of pictures of Robin Hood, that's not me. You're in the wrong place. And all my contact details are on the website. If anybody just wants to chat, very happy just to have a chat with anybody. And if it leads to working together, that'd be fantastic. If it's just a chat, absolutely fine, no problem at all.
All right. Well, really appreciate the value today. I think it's been, I've found it really interesting, so I'm sure other people will as well.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for having me on.
No problem.